beneath the vast hush of Aotearoa's ancient nights, where the sky stretched like a velvet cloak embroidered with ancestral light, there lived a story that moved not only through time, but through the marrow of longing itself. It whispered across lakes that held the memory of gods, drifted through forests that trembled with the breath of creation, and clung to the pulse of hearts that dared to love beyond the boundaries carved by men. This story, old as the first dawn and soft as the sigh after a dream, begins not with names or faces, but with the tender trembling of a desire that the world was never meant to silence. For in a land shaped by spirits, where every mountain was an ancestor, and every ripple on the water carried a secret, love itself became a force both sacred and perilous, something that breathed, something that beckoned, something that refused to be contained. Imagine a lake, Rotorua, wide and deep, its waters shimmering like a sheet of obsidian caressed by moonlight. Its surface was calm, but beneath lay currents of ancient memory, woven with the voices of those who had loved, fought, hoped, and vanished into legend. Night after night, the lake carried soft echoes of distant music, a flute that rose like smoke from a fire of yearning, drifting across the water, reaching out to whoever dared to listen. This music did not name the one who played it, nor the one who felt its tremble in her bones, yet it held them both in its invisible hands. It shaped the air, thickening it with promise. It touched the dawn, leaving it blushing, and it curled into the darkness like a question with only one possible answer. The Māori world from which this myth unfurled was one in which nothing was ever merely physical. Lakes were not just lakes, they were thresholds, pathways, mirrors between the mortal and the divine. Tribes were not simply communities, they were weavings of blood, duty, kinship, and sacred responsibility. Music was not simple sound, it was breath shaped into emotion, carrying the soul of the player into the heart of the listener. And love was both a blessing and a storm, a choice that could unite families or shatter them, a whisper that could become a war cry, a touch that could transform a life or condemn it. In such a world, sensuality was not something concealed, it lived openly in the textures of nature, in the glide of water over skin, in the warmth of sunlight slipping across shoulders, in the hum of night insects trembling through the air. Emotion moved like tides. Longing had weight, like a stone held in the hand, or a breath waiting to be released. Every glance, every step, every shiver beneath the moon carried the possibility of becoming part of a tale whispered to future generations. And this particular tale, this hum of forbidden hearts, began long before the lovers themselves ever touched. It began as an atmosphere, a tension, a trembling thread of destiny stretching across the lake, binding two souls who could feel each other long before they knew each other. There was something inevitable in their story, though no one could yet name it. It waited in the shadows between the trees, in the space between notes of a flute, in the hush before dawn. It lived in the way the wind brushed the surface of the water, like fingers tracing the curve of a secret. It lived in the way the earth seemed to pause whenever the music drifted across the lake at night, as though the land itself leaned in to listen. Ancestral spirits, awake in the dark, watched the slow convergence of two fates that would defy distance, expectations, and the silent walls built around them. They watched and recognized the unmistakable glow of a story about to ignite. And yet the myth does not begin with a meeting. It begins with separation. Two hearts on opposite shores, each moved by an ache that neither could fully understand. Perhaps that is the first truth of all great love stories, that yearning arrives before touch, before words, before the world allows the lovers to stand beside each other. Yearning is the seed, the spark, the first breath of a destiny that refuses to remain still. So this myth begins with that breath, with a woman whose spirit was bright as sunrise, and a man whose music carried the weight of unsaid dreams. But for now, they remain only silhouettes in the distance, felt, not yet seen. Around them, life continued with the rhythm of tradition, elders tending to sacred stories, warriors practicing beneath the sun, families weaving their identities into the strength of the tribe. Every dawn brought duty, every dusk brought reflection, and in between came the eternal struggle between what one owes to one's people and what one owes to one's heart. It was in that struggle that the sensual tone of this tale found its roots. For nothing is more intoxicating than love that must hide, love that must move in shadows, love that must carve a path through the expectations of many to reach the soul of one. The myth invites the listener into this space of tension, not sharp, not violent, but tenderly dangerous. It is a tension that hums beneath the skin, that curls into the thoughts of anyone who has ever felt drawn to someone they were not meant to touch. It is the tension of fingertips almost brushing, of glances caught and quickly abandoned, of breaths held for a moment too long. Even before Hinemoa and Tūtanekai appear in clarity, their story breathes through this mood. The lake knows them, the wind knows them, the ancestors know them, and the listener too begins to sense that something powerful is taking shape. But the story is patient. Like the moon slowly rising over still water, it reveals itself by degrees. It lingers on the sensuality of nature itself, the way the lake embraces night, the way the trees sway like bodies lost in a slow dance, the way the stars hang low enough to feel like witnesses. It lingers on the emotional current that flows through Maori storytelling, where the line between human and spirit is never sharply drawn, and where love is always more than desire. It is connection, duty, sacrifice, and the courage to defy the boundaries woven around the heart. In this myth, those boundaries are clear even before they are named. Two tribes, two destinies, two lives shaped by responsibilities heavier than any heart should have to bear. And yet, beneath all this structure, something fluid stirs, something as unstoppable as water finding its way through stone. That fluidity is the essence of the myth's sensuality, the knowledge that emotion, once awakened, will ripple outward no matter how many hands try to still it. As the story prepares to bring the lovers into focus, it asks the listener to feel before understanding, to feel the weight of anticipation like a hush before a storm, to feel the pull of the lake inviting yet dangerous, to feel the subtle tremor of music drifting from an unseen shore, to feel, above all, that destiny has already chosen its path, and that the world around them is beginning to tilt in its direction. For in the heart of every forbidden love story lies this truth: no force, no rule, no distance can extinguish the flame lit by recognition, the moment one soul senses another across the gulf of possibility. And in this myth, that flame begins not with sight, but with sound, not with touch, but with longing, not with certainty, but with the haunting promise that somewhere across the dark water, someone is waiting. And so the myth opens like a slow, deep breath, sensual, emotional, dreamlike, rooted in sacred land and ancient memory, held together by the shimmering thread of love that should not exist, yet insists on existing. A love that begins as an atmosphere, a tension, a whisper of destiny moving through the night, drawing two souls toward a meeting the world will try and fail to prevent. Hinemoa's presence within her tribe was like the shimmer of dawn on quiet water, gentle, luminous, yet touched by a strength that could not be denied. She carried herself with a serenity that made others lower their voices when she passed, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Her lineage was noble, rooted in generations of leaders whose mana shaped the land and guided the people. From childhood, she had been taught to listen before speaking, to watch before acting, to honor every breath as part of a larger rhythm that connected her not only to her tribe, but to the ancestors who lived through her. Though she moved with the grace expected of someone born to such standing, there was a spark beneath her calm exterior, an ember of quiet rebellion that flickered whenever the wind shifted across the lake, or whenever music drifted through the night. Hinemoa absorbed the world with a sensitivity that made everything feel deeper. The weight of responsibilities placed upon her, the beauty woven into everyday rituals, the invisible boundaries that shaped her destiny. And yet, beneath her poised demeanor, something in her longed to push against those boundaries, to test the strength of the walls built around her heart. Tūtanekai, across the waters, was a different kind of force, storm-touched, restless, alive with the fever of emotion. His music was his heartbeat, each note of his kawawau a confession he did not know how to give in words. He played in the dark hours, letting the flute's voice rise into the night like a spirit seeking a home. To hear him was to feel the rawness of yearning, the vulnerability of someone who carried too many emotions for his chest to contain. Though strong and skilled in the ways expected of a warrior, it was his music that revealed the truth of him. A man shaped not only by physical power, but by the intensity of feeling. He was respected within his tribe, admired for his determination and generosity. Yet he also bore the quiet ache of someone who lived just outside the boundaries of what others expected. His lineage, though honorable, did not place him among the highest ranks, a fact that often shadowed his dreams. Still within him burned a desire he could never silence, the desire to be seen for the full truth of his spirit, to be loved not for duty, but for the fire that lived inside him. These two souls, separated by water and bound by unseen threads, mirrored each other in ways neither could yet name. Hinemoa's quiet rebellion matched Tūtanekai's restless longing. Her serenity soothed the storm inside him. His passion ignited the flame within her. Each carried an absence the other unknowingly filled. Hinemoa, with her calm grace, felt incomplete without a spark. Tūtanekai, with his burning intensity, longed for an anchor that could hold him steady. They were like moonlight and tide, different forces, yet drawn together by the pull of something ancient and inevitable. The lake between them did not separate them. It reflected the truth of their connection, shimmering with the unspoken knowledge that their spirits recognized each other long before their eyes ever would. Yet their world was not made for such a union. Hinemoa's tribe held expectations like carved stone, firm, unmovable, sacred. She was a daughter of rank, a woman whose marriage would strengthen alliances, reinforce stability, and honor her ancestors. Suitors came from respected lineages, carrying gifts and polished words, but none stirred the quiet storm in her chest. She met them with grace, with composure, with the poise of one trained to hide her true desires. They did not see what lived behind her eyes, the dream of something deeper, freer, more consuming than the alliances proposed for her. Her family believed they knew the path she must follow. They saw her as a pillar, a future leader, a symbol of continuity. They did not see the small tremor of longing that touched her fingertips whenever the night wind carried distant music across the water. Tūtanekai, too, lived under the shadow of boundaries. Though respected, he was not of the highest rank, and his claim to any daughter of nobility would be questioned before it was ever considered. His place within the tribal structure was honored, but limited. He was valued for his strength and admired for his skill, yet those in power viewed him as someone whose destiny should follow the well-trodden paths of duty. He was expected to choose a partner who matched his standing, a woman who would uphold tradition and secure his family's future. Yet when he played his flute beneath the cloak of night, those expectations felt distant, almost unreal. The notes that drifted from his kauauau were not shaped by duty. They were shaped by yearning, by imagination, by the belief that somewhere across the water, someone could hear him, someone whose soul might answer his own. Between them stretched the lake, both barrier and bridge. It reflected the stars that watched over their fates, holding in its depths the tension between desire and prohibition. The water carried Tūtanekai's music to Hinemoa's shore, slipping through the veil of night to touch her in ways she could not articulate. When she heard those notes, something inside her stirred, an ancient recognition, a soft ache, a pull that grew stronger with each passing dusk. She did not know the musician's face, yet she felt she knew him in some older, deeper way. The music reached her like a hand outstretched through darkness, inviting her to feel rather than obey, to dream rather than accept, It spoke to a part of her that no one had ever reached, a part hidden, even from herself. Tūtanekai felt her too, though he did not yet know how. When he played, he sensed an unseen listener, someone who received his emotions with a tenderness the world seldom offered him. The wind carried back an echo, faint but undeniable, that made his chest tighten with hope. He imagined her sometimes, not her appearance, but the shape of her presence. A calm warmth, a steady glow, a strength that would not be intimidated by his intensity. He dreamed of a soul who could meet his fire with both courage and compassion, someone who could see the man behind the music. External forces threaded through their lives like nets cast by unseen hands. Elders, family lines, tribal politics, all formed a web designed to dictate the direction of their futures. In such a world, love could be dangerous, even reckless. A connection that defied boundaries could fracture alliances, stir tensions, disrupt the fragile balance between tribes. Hinemoa knew this. Tūtanekai felt it. Both understood that longing was not enough to reshape destiny. And yet destiny seemed to be shaping itself regardless of the structures meant to contain it. Hinemoa's family watched her carefully, sensing the subtle shifts in her gaze whenever the music drifted across the water. They wondered what stirred her thoughts, what warmed her expression when she believed no one noticed. They whispered about duty, about appropriate matches, about the fate she must accept. Hinemoa listened with respect, but her heart wandered far beyond the borders of their expectations. Tūtanekai's people, too, noticed his restlessness. They saw the way he turned toward the lake each night, as though searching for something hidden in the darkness. They reminded him of his responsibilities, his future, the path laid out for him since birth. Yet he could not silence the yearning that grew stronger with every note he played. Two souls, shaped by their worlds, yet reaching beyond them, lived in a tension so delicate it trembled like a reed in the wind. Their destinies circled each other, drawing closer, pulled by forces older than their tribes, older than their ancestors, older than the stars reflected in the waters of Rotorua. And so without meeting, without speaking, without knowing each other's names, they began to change. The lake became a thread between them, weaving their spirits closer. What started as curiosity grew into longing, and longing into an undeniable certainty. Something waited for them in the space between their worlds, something nor rules nor distance could keep forever at bay. Always. The days moved like slow tides, carrying Hinemoa and Tūtanekai deeper into a longing neither could name aloud. What began as a subtle stirring within their chests grew into an ache that pulsed through every hour, as persistent and quiet as the rhythm of the lake against the shore. Each sunset seemed to heighten the tension, painting the sky in colors that mirrored their inner turmoil, soft pinks that whispered of tenderness, deep reds that hinted at danger, and fading golds that spoke of moments slipping away. And every night, under the cloak of darkness, the music returned. Tūtanekai's flute,
rose like a fragile promise across the water, threading through the shadows to reach Hinemoa's waiting heart. With each note, desire deepened, feeding the quiet rebellion within her, awakening emotions she could no longer deny. She would sit by the edge of the lake, the cool stones pressing gently against her legs, and let the sound seep into her bones. The distance between them, silent, vast, and shimmering, felt unbearably alive. It was as though the lake itself held its breath, listening alongside her, aware of the forbidden connection that swelled with every trembling note. Hinemoa's fingers often tightened around the fabric of her cloak as she tried to calm the storm inside her. But the music only stirred it further. She felt seen, felt understood, felt chosen by a voice she had never spoken to. The yearning that filled her chest was not the delicate longing of a passing fancy. It was a tidal pull, strong enough to alter the very shape of her world. For Tūtanekai, the nights had become a ritual of surrender. He played not out of habit, but necessity, as though releasing his emotions into the air kept him from unraveling entirely. Each breath he gave to the flute carried unspoken messages, hopes, fears, desires too raw to voice. He imagined the music brushing against Hinemoa's skin, imagined her listening with that quiet intensity he sensed from across the water. Though he could not see her, he felt her presence in every pause between notes, in every shift of the wind that carried his song back to him like a sigh. But with the sweetness of this imagined connection came the sharp bitterness of reality. He knew their worlds were separated by more than just the lake. They were divided by expectations as vast and deep as the waters themselves. Whispers had begun to stir within Hinemoa's tribe. Her family noticed her wandering gazes toward the opposite shore, the way she lingered near the water at night, her eyes luminous with something unspoken. They did not know of Tūtanekai's music, but they sensed danger in the shift of her spirit, the soft glow that lit her expression when she believed herself alone. Her elders reminded her gently, then firmly, of her responsibilities, of the alliances she must honor through marriage, of the delicate balance of power that rested on her choices. Their concern was not unkind, but it pressed against her like a tightening rope, reminding her of the cage built around her heart. Each reminder made her longing more potent, more desperate. Every warning deepened her sense that something within her needed to break free, no matter the consequences.
Tūtanekai felt similar pressures weighing on him. Those close to him noticed how often his eyes drifted toward the lake, how distracted he had become during training, how his music carried a new intensity that bordered on painful. Some teased him, others worried, but a few, the ones who understood the complexities of tribal expectations, spoke to him with caution. They reminded him that the daughters of high chiefs were not for him, that dreaming beyond his place was dangerous, that such desires could end not only in heartbreak, but in tension between tribes. Tūtanekai listened, but their words slid off him like water off stone. The feeling inside him had grown too strong to be unwound by warnings. His heart had already crossed a boundary his body was forbidden to. Nights grew warmer as the season shifted, and with the warmth came a heightened sensuality in the air, heavy, fragrant, alive. The moon hung lower in the sky,
casting silver paths across the lake that seemed almost like invitations. Hinemoa felt the moonlight kiss her skin, felt the breeze caress her neck, felt the lake's soft murmurs against the stones, as though nature itself encouraged her disobedience. Her dreams became vivid. She saw hands she had never touched, eyes she had never met, a presence that wrapped around her like heat. She would wake with her pulse racing, the yearning inside her stretched thin and trembling. For Tūtanekai, the lake became a mirror of his emotions, sometimes still and reflective, other times dark and restless. He began to play his flute not only at night, but in the fading glow of dusk, letting the last rays of sunlight warm his skin as he poured his heart into the notes. The music grew bolder, richer, more desperate. Each melody seemed to reach more insistently across the water, as though begging to be heard, as though begging Hinemoa to come closer. He imagined her sitting by the shore, imagined her waiting, imagined her longing mirroring his own. The vision filled him with a mixture of agony and ecstasy, tightening his chest with a desire that refused to be quiet. Obstacles surrounded them from every direction, yet the more rigid these walls became, the more powerful their longing grew. The lake, once a peaceful barrier, now looked like a challenge, a test, a stretch of fate that dared Hinemoa to cross it. Her tribe's disapproval loomed like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. Tūtanekai's uncertainty about his place in the world gnawed at him, making him question whether he had the right to dream of someone so far beyond his reach. But desire does not measure itself against logic. It simply grows. And between these two souls, it grew like fire catching on dry brush, slow at first, then suddenly fierce, unstoppable.
The warm nights deepened the sensual energy surrounding them. Cicadas hummed in the trees, their song harmonizing with Tūtanekai's flute. The air carried the scent of earth and water and blooming flowers, wrapping Hinemoa in an intoxicating atmosphere that made every breath feel charged with meaning. Sometimes she would stand in the shallows, letting the cool water slip around her ankles, imagining the lake as the only barrier between her and the one whose music stirred something ancient within her. She traced patterns in the water with her toes, watched the ripples stretch toward the opposite shore, and wondered if he could somehow feel her presence in return. Tūtanekai often walked the edge of his own shore, staring across the distance with an ache he could no longer contain. He imagined the touch of a hand he had never held, imagined the softness of a voice he had never heard, imagined the warmth of a body drawn close beneath moonlit skies. His desire took on a life of its own, whispering to him in the quiet hours, urging him to reach for something forbidden yet irresistible. He knew the consequences of crossing tribal lines. He knew the risks of pursuing a love beyond his station. But every time he lifted his flute to his lips, the truth became clear. He was already lost to her. The tension between them stretched tighter each night, vibrating like a cord pulled to the edge of breaking. Neither spoke a word of their longing, yet their unspoken connection grew so intense it felt as though the lake itself trembled under the weight of it. Hinemoa felt the pressure pressing against her chest, urging her to move, to act, to claim the destiny calling her name. Tūtanekai felt his own restraint fraying with every breath, every note, every glance toward the shimmering path of moonlight on the water. Desire had become unbearable. It seeped into their thoughts, their dreams, their very breath. It made the distance between them feel like agony. It made the rules of their world feel suffocating. It made the lake beautiful, sacred, waiting, feel like a threshold destined to be crossed. And so the pressure built night after night until action ceased to be a choice and became inevitability. The world around them held its breath, sensing the moment drawing near when longing would transform into motion, when yearning would become courage, when two souls pulled together by destiny would finally dare to defy everything that stood between them.
The night Hinemoa finally made her choice began like any other, quiet and soft, with the lake lying under a thin veil of moonlight that shimmered like a promise made long before her birth. Yet something in the air felt different, charged, expectant, trembling like the breath drawn before a long-awaited confession. The sky stretched wide above her, glowing with pale silver as if the ancestors themselves illuminated her path, urging her to step beyond fear. She stood at the rocky shore, her pulse a steady drum beneath her skin, her breath shallow but determined. Every lesson taught to her since childhood echoed inside her: duty, caution, obedience. But none could silence the fierce longing that had taken root in her chest. The music had already begun on the opposite side of the lake, faint but unmistakable, a thread of sound weaving through the darkness. It was Tūtanekai's flute, tender and yearning, a voice she had never touched yet felt as intimately as her own heartbeat. She closed her eyes and let the melody wash over her. It rose and fell like waves against a distant shore, filling every hollow place within her with warmth and ache. The world around her faded into shadow, leaving only the music, the moonlit water, and the wild, trembling desire pulling her forward. She felt the soft breeze brush her cheek, as though urging her to move, to break free from the invisible walls built around her life. Her breath shook, her fingers curled, the cool stones beneath her feet felt like the edge of a precipice, and the lake beyond felt like the unknown she had been born to embrace. Fear fluttered within her, sharp and bright, but beneath it flowed something deeper, courage shaped by longing, determination shaped by love. She stepped closer to the shoreline, feeling the first kiss of water against her skin. It was cold, shockingly so, but it electrified her, waking every nerve in her body. She imagined Tūtanekai playing beneath the stars, unaware of how close she stood to him, unaware of the choice blooming inside her, unaware that this night would change everything. The music drifted over the water again, its notes stretching thin across distance, trembling with the same yearning that filled her chest. With each breath, the decision inside her solidified. Each inhale fed her courage, each exhale shed the last threads of hesitation. She knew the risks, disapproval, consequences, even danger, yet the thought of remaining on her shore, silent, restrained, aching, felt far more unbearable than anything waiting on the other side.
Hinemoa inhaled deeply, drawing the night into her lungs, drawing the strength of her ancestors into her bones. Then, without allowing herself another moment of doubt, she slipped into the lake. The water enveloped her instantly, cool and vast and sacred, closing around her like an ancient embrace. She gasped softly as the chill climbed her body, but she kept moving, pushing past the initial shock. The lake held her weight gently, lifting her as though guiding her forward. The moon cast a shimmering path across the surface, a pale ribbon leading straight toward the source of the flute's song. She followed it. Her strokes were steady but urgent, each movement fueled by the burning need to reach the one who called her without ever knowing her name. The water murmured around her, whispering secrets against her skin. Every splash of her arm, every kick beneath the surface echoed with determination. Her breath came sharp, her heartbeat thundered, but her resolve did not waver. She felt the pull of the lake's currents, felt the strain in her limbs, felt the cold seeping deeper, but none of it could outweigh the warmth surging from her heart outward. And always, guiding her like a beacon, was the flute. Its music grew clearer with each stroke, growing brighter, fuller, warmer. It wrapped around her like a guiding hand, holding her steady even as exhaustion nipped at her edges. The lake stretched endlessly beneath her, yet she moved through it as though driven by something greater than her own strength. Tūtanekai played, unaware of the transformation taking place across the water. He played because the night demanded it, because the ache inside him needed release, because the music was the only way he knew to express the longing he carried like a secret flame. But something in the air felt different tonight too. His fingers trembled on the flute. His breath carried a sharper edge, as though sensing a shift in the world around him. His melody deepened, thickened with emotion, reaching out into the darkness with an intensity he had never known before. Some part of him, unconscious, ancient, instinctive, felt her coming. Hinemoa pushed through the final stretch of water, her muscles trembling, her chest burning with effort, but the music grew louder, clearer, wrapping around her like a promise, close enough to touch. The shore finally appeared through the silver haze, dark and solid and breathtaking. With a final burst of strength, she reached the stones and grasped them, pulling herself from the water. Her breath tore from her lungs, ragged and hot against the cold night. Her wet garments clung to her skin, heavy and dripping, but she barely felt them. Every part of her was focused on the sound, those lingering notes rising in the air, drawing her forward like a summons from destiny itself.
Tūtanekai lowered his flute for a moment, sensing movement nearby. He turned, his eyes adjusting to the moonlit shadows, and saw her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The world narrowed to the space between them, thick with everything they had felt but never spoken. Hinemoa stood trembling at the edge of the clearing, her hair dripping, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The moon lit her like a figure carved from starlight. Tūtanekai felt his breath falter, his heart lurching in his chest. The recognition struck him not through sight, but through something deeper. An instinctual knowing, a shock of connection that traveled through him like lightning. She stepped forward, he stepped toward her. The lake's distant murmur faded. The night held its breath. When they finally stood face to face, the tension that had stretched across countless nights snapped into a moment of pure, aching release. Hinemoa reached up, her fingers trembling as they touched his face, softly at first, as though afraid he might vanish like a dream, but he didn't vanish. He leaned into her touch, his hand rising to cradle her cheek, his thumb tracing the path of a water droplet gliding down her skin. Their breaths mingled, warm and uneven. Emotion surged through them, overwhelming in its intensity. Words were unnecessary. The connection between them spoke louder than any language. Their foreheads met, gently at first, then with the weight of everything they had carried alone for so long. The warmth of his skin against hers soothed the cold still clinging to her body. She felt his heartbeat steadying under her palms, felt her own heartbeat answering it, two rhythms moving toward a single pulse. Tūtanekai closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the presence he had only ever sensed through sound. Hinemoa exhaled softly, her breath brushing his lips like the first whisper of dawn. The closeness enveloped them, safe and intoxicating, dissolving every barrier the world had built around them. In that breathless space, moon above, lake behind, destiny before, they found the union their souls had sought across distance and impossibility. Their embrace unfolded slowly, reverently, as though they feared disturbing the sacredness of the moment. Their bodies fit together with startling ease, warm and trembling and utterly alive. It felt like stepping into sunlight after a lifetime of shadow. It felt like coming home. The lake, the moon, the ancestors, everything seemed to glow around them, acknowledging the transformation rippling through the night. Hinemoa and Tūtanekai held each other, as though the world had finally aligned, as though every note played, every longing breath, every forbidden moment had led to this. And in that moment, they became not two souls bound by distance, but one.
In the wake of Hinemoa's daring crossing of Lake Rotorua and the trembling reunion with Tūtanekai, the world around them shifts like mist, parting before the dawn. What had been shaped by secrecy, yearning, and whispered dreams now stands revealed beneath the first light of consequence. Their union, born of passion and destiny, sends ripples through their tribes, families, and ancestral expectations. And these ripples grow into waves that will remake the shoreline of their lives. In this fragile moment after fulfillment, the air feels heavy with both promise and uncertainty,
as though the ancestors themselves hold their breath to see what will unfold. News spread swiftly across both shores. Hinemoa, the chief's cherished daughter, has defied all boundaries to reclaim her own heart. Some gasp in disbelief, others in admiration, and still others in quiet envy, for not everyone dares to live with such courage. The elders murmur of propriety, of alliances that should have been formed with other powerful families, of the sacred order that her choice now unsettles. Yet beneath their stern facades lies an undeniable fascination, because, whether they admit it or not, they sense that a myth is being born before their eyes. Hinemoa stands with her spine straight and her spirit unbroken, no longer hidden by the veil of hesitation that once dimmed her inner fire. She looks upon her people with calm determination, her skin still carrying the memory of the cold lake, her heart still echoing with Tūtanekai's music. Her father approaches, not with anger, as many feared, but with the solemn gravity of a man learning that his daughter's spirit is far stronger, far wilder than he ever realized. Her defiance stings him, but somewhere beneath that sting grows a reluctant pride, the kind that only arises when witnessing a soul brave enough to choose love over obedience. Tūtanekai, by her side, feels this moment as though it were carved directly into his bones. He steps forward, his voice steady, though his heart trembles like a plucked string, and he offers respect to Hinemoa's family. His humility does not hide his strength. His passion does not overshadow his sincerity. Those who once dismissed him as a musician of lower status now see the quiet power in his gaze, the depth of devotion that Hinemoa was willing to risk everything for. In him, they begin to understand the shape of her choice.
The tribes gather under the open sky, with Lake Rotorua shimmering between them like a witness. The waters that once separated the lovers now reflect the merging of their destinies. Elders consult with one another. Younger members whisper of romance and destiny. Some protest, clinging to tradition, fearing the dissolution of long-standing agreements meant to secure alliances and maintain balance. Others argue that love touched by such courage must carry the blessing of the ancestors, for no ordinary bond could inspire a woman to cross a cold, moonlit lake guided only by a flute and the fire in her heart. Hinemoa listens, her expression serene, though inside her emotions swirl like currents beneath a calm surface. She knows that the future hinges on these debates, on every word spoken under this sacred sky. Yet she does not regret what she has done. The memory of Tūtanekai's arms around her, the warmth that blossomed in her chest when she heard his music through the night, the certainty that their spirits resonated as though carved from the same star, these truths remain her anchor. At last, the final voices fall silent, and the elder most respected among them steps forward. He has watched the lovers carefully, has listened not only to the arguments, but to the spaces between them, to the unspoken recognition that something powerful has entered their world. He lifts his carved staff and speaks of love as a force that weaves through the lineage of all peoples, shaping destinies,
binding families and reminding mortals of the divine essence within them. He acknowledges the upheaval, the concerns, the fear of what such a union might bring. But he also acknowledges that the ancestors often guide hearts toward paths that cannot be understood through tradition alone. His verdict, carried on the wind, changes everything. The union will be recognized, not because it aligns with the previous plans of the tribe, but because denying it would deny the very spirit that sustains their people. Love that crosses boundaries, he declares, renews the world, for it forces hearts to grow larger than the walls built around them. A murmur rises from the assembled families, relief, shock, uncertainty, and slowly acceptance. Hinemoa's father exhales deeply, feeling the last remnants of resistance fall away as he steps toward the couple. For a long moment he simply looks at them, his gaze moving from Hinemoa's resolute eyes to Tūtanekai's unwavering devotion. Then he nods, not in resignation, but in recognition. A father's love expands, reluctantly perhaps, but undeniably, making space for the man who now holds his daughter's heart. Hinemoa reaches for Tūtanekai's hand, and when their fingers entwine, it feels as though the world shifts into a new rhythm, one that belongs to them, yet also to everyone who witnesses the moment. They are no longer two hidden flames flickering across the water. They are a single fire that illuminates the path ahead.
In the days that follow, the tribes adapt to the new reality shaped by the lovers' courage. Conversations begin anew, alliances reimagined, expectations re-examined. Where once their love had been deemed a threat, it now becomes a symbol of possibility, a reminder that tradition is not broken by change, but strengthened by its ability to grow. Their story inspires others to look inward, to question whether the boundaries they cling to were built from wisdom or from fear. Hinemoa and Tūtanekai walk through this evolving world with humility and gratitude, understanding the weight their union carries. They visit both shores of the lake, honoring the ancestors whose presence they feel in every whisper of the wind, every ripple of the waters that once separated them. They offer thanks for the courage that guided their steps and for the voices that ultimately chose compassion over rigidity. Yet even as their love reshapes the order around them, they remain deeply human. Two souls who have found refuge in each other after so much longing. At night, when the world grows quiet, they sit beside the lake, Tūtanekai's flute resting across his knees, and they let the serenity of their shared breath fill the space between them. Sometimes he plays for her, the notes weaving warmth through the air, echoing the melody that once guided her across the water. Sometimes she simply watches him, feeling her heart settle into a peace she had never known before that fateful night. Their union becomes more than a personal victory. It becomes a living testament to the power of love that dares to defy every barrier placed before it. Children will one day hear the tale of the woman who crossed a lake for the man whose music captured her soul, and they will learn that devotion is not passive, it is active, courageous, and transformative. Elders will tell the story to remind their people that destiny often speaks in whispers, carried in the notes of a flute or the ripples of a lake under moonlight. Thus, the outcome of their love resonates through generations, becoming not a disruption of order, but a renewal of it. For through Hinemoa and Tūtanekai, the tribes discover that love is not a threat to tradition, but its most sacred companion, guiding each new generation toward deeper wisdom, broader compassion, and a more profound understanding of what it means to truly choose one another.
There are moments in human history that shine beyond their own time, moments in which the choices of two hearts echo far louder than the borders drawn around them. The story of Hinemoa and Tūtanekai becomes one of these moments, not because of the obstacles they faced, but because of the love that compelled them to move through those obstacles with unwavering devotion. When we return to their myth in quiet contemplation, what remains is not simply the memory of a woman crossing a lake, or the music of a man calling out across the night. What endures is the sensation of something deeper, something that trembles through the fabric of every generation that hears their tale. It is the reminder that love, true, courageous, vulnerable love, is powerful enough to reorder the world. Their story lingers because it speaks to a desire that lives within every human soul. We all long to be seen, understood, and chosen, not for the alliances we might create or the roles we are expected to play, but for the truth of who we are beneath all the surfaces. Hinemoa refused to be confined by the expectations laid upon her, and Tūtanekai refused to quiet the yearning that shaped his music. In their defiance, we witness two spirits carving space for themselves in a world that insisted they remain apart. Their myth teaches us that when the heart recognizes its counterpart, no boundary, neither distance, nor tradition, nor fear can fully extinguish that recognition. The power of their love is not found in grandeur, but in honesty. It is in the quiet moments, the soft breath between flute notes drifting across the water, the trembling decision made under a moonlit sky, the first look when longing finally meets fulfillment. These moments become the true pulse of the myth, reminding us that intimacy is not born from spectacle, but from presence. The sensuality woven into their tale is not about physicality alone. It is the sensuality of connection, of two energies resonating with such harmony that the world around them begins to shift. We reflect on their courage because it holds a mirror to our own lives. How often do we silence our desires out of fear of disapproval? How often do we reshape our truth to fit the molds handed down to us?
Hinemoa and Tūtanekai show us what becomes possible when we choose not to shrink before the weight of expectations. Their actions were not reckless. They were rooted in the profound understanding that authenticity sometimes requires risk. Their myth becomes a quiet encouragement whispered to anyone who has ever felt torn between duty and desire. The heart is not meant to be muted.
Their tale also teaches the delicate art of vulnerability. Tūtanekai's music carries more than longing. It carries openness, the willingness to be heard, to be known, to be reached. Hinemoa's journey across the dark waters is not only an act of bravery, it is an act of surrender to the depth of her own feelings. To love deeply is to step willingly into uncertainty, trusting that the person who waits on the other shore will receive us with the same tenderness we offer. In this way, their myth becomes a guide, showing how vulnerability is not weakness, but a path toward connection. As we sit with the myth in its final light, another truth rises gently to the surface. Love has the power to transform, not only individuals, but entire communities. The tribes who once forbade their union eventually came to see the beauty in their bond. Tradition did not crumble, it expanded, softened, learned to breathe in new ways. Love became the teacher, revealing that strength is found not in rigid boundaries, but in the ability to grow beyond them. Their union reshaped more than their own fates. It reshaped the expectations of those who bore witness, leaving behind a legacy of openness and hope. But perhaps the deepest resonance of their story lies in its sense of timeless longing. Every generation who listens can feel the night breeze over Lake Rotorua, can hear the distant flute that calls not only across water, but across the boundaries within ourselves. The myth awakens something ancient, the instinct to move toward what pulls us, even when the path is difficult, even when others say it cannot be done. Hinemoa's swim becomes a symbol for every journey taken toward love, a reminder that devotion is rarely convenient, but it is always meaningful. In this reflection, we also return to the sensual undercurrent of their tale. Sensuality here is not a mere adornment, but the thread that binds the emotional landscape. It is found in the warmth of their breath in the early morning, in the electricity that hums between two souls recognizing each other, in the quiet certainty that rises when love is finally spoken aloud. This sensual essence keeps the myth alive, not as a static story, but as a living presence that stirs the heart each time it is told. It reminds us that love is not only a feeling, but an experience that moves through the body as much as through the spirit. As we reflect, we sense how their story touches the universal desire for belonging. Tūtanekai's music reveals his longing to be heard, and Hinemoa's journey reveals her longing to be embraced without restraint. Their myth whispers to all who have ever stood on one shore, looking across a distance towards someone or something that feels like home. It tells us that the path to belonging often requires movement, sometimes bold, sometimes trembling, always meaningful.
In this final contemplation, we begin to recognize how the myth invites us into our own depths. It asks, what shores are we afraid to cross? What songs lie hidden within us, waiting to be heard? What boundaries do we cling to out of habit rather than truth? Through their courage, Hinemoa and Tūtanekai offer the gentle suggestion that life becomes fuller, richer, and more luminous when we trust the pull of the heart. Their story lingers because it holds both sweetness and ache. There is sweetness in their reunion, in the warmth that finally replaces longing. And there is ache because we know that such courage is rare, that not every love is met with acceptance, that not every longing finds its echo. Yet the myth does not ask us to dwell in sorrow. Instead, it leaves us with a sense of possibility, a reminder that even in a world full of barriers, love remains one of the most transformative forces we can experience. As the reflection deepens, we begin to understand that the myth stays with us not as a lesson, but as a sensation. It becomes the quiet hum beneath the surface of our thoughts, the subtle tremor that rises when we feel drawn to someone or something with inexplicable strength. It becomes a guide, encouraging us to move with sincerity, to speak with openness, to allow ourselves to feel deeply even when the world feels uncertain. Hinemoa and Tūtanekai's love becomes a bridge between the human and the timeless. It reminds us that every act of devotion, every moment of courage, every heartbeat surrendered to longing carries within it the potential to reshape not only our own lives, but the world around us. Their myth endures because the emotions it awakens, desire, uncertainty, courage, connection, are the same ones that pulse through our lives today. And so the story closes not with an ending, but with a lingering resonance. It leaves behind the soft glow of moonlight on water, the echo of a flute carried on the wind, the memory of a woman moving through darkness towards the light of her chosen heart. It leaves us with the sense that love, when it is true and brave, does not merely fill the heart, it expands it. It teaches us to see, to feel, to choose with clarity and tenderness. The final reflection of their myth is a breath that stays suspended within us, a gentle invitation to listen more closely to the longings that shape our own lives. It urges us to remember that love is not a destination, but a movement, a stirring, a call that arrives softly and insistently. When we honor that call, we discover not only the essence of connection, but the essence of ourselves. Their story thus becomes a reminder, subtle yet profound, that the path of the heart, no matter how uncertain, leads always toward a deeper understanding of what it means to be fully alive.